Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our Digital Week and to our first webinar. Can AI understand humans? That's the question today. In the future, what will conversations with digital bots and digital assistants look like and feel like? And what are they already capable of today? My name is Friederike Rieder and I'm very happy to have Professor Siegfried Handschuh with me today. Siegfried is full professor of data science at our university, and he's one of the pioneers building up our new School of Computer Science. Before we start, just two remarks for those of you who are joining us for the first time today. We will, of course, record the session and distribute the link to the recording and also to the slides sometime next week. And the presentation will last around 25 to 30 minutes. That gives us plenty of time to discuss your questions afterwards. Please use the Q&A or F&A field in your Zoom program to type your questions. Depending on the software version you're using, you can also upvote those questions you find most interesting or relevant, and you can even comment on those. You can even use the chat to exchange with fellow participants. So now I would like to welcome Siegfried. Thank you for taking the time. The floor is yours, and I wish you an insightful lunch break.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to give this webinar. It's the first time I'm doing that. Bear with me while I try here to share my screen so that you can see my slides. And if everything works successful, you should see what I can see here. Does it work? Very good. So the question is, can AI understand humans? Depending where you come from, you would say, does this not already work? Or, well, will that ever work? In the following, I will talk about AI, also a little bit about the history, past, present, and future, but mainly about the question of natural language understanding. The question I'm referring to was also raised, as you see in the slides, some time ago in popular science newspapers as well as in the New York Times, where they referred to the question, it would be incredibly useful if we have machines that can understand language, but we don't know how to build them. That was 2016. And 2 years ago, there was the opinion that AI has hit the barrier with meaning. I will come in a second to what works and what doesn't work. But in general, there is the observation that while in image recognition, we have kind of superhuman performance by machines, so they can better recognize people in the image than humans can do. It's not quite sure if we're there yet with machines. But also we had in the last 2 years incredible progress, and I will show you bits and pieces of that progress. But first, let me give you an intuition about what's possible at the moment, at least what is possible with what we see on the market. And one of the main challenge with AI and understanding what humans say is semantics. If you don't know yet what that means, don't worry, I will tell you in a minute. But I would actually like to start with a question, because we talk about AI that understands humans. So one example of that in the market would be Alexa. And my first question to you would be, do you have Alexa at home? And if you have it at home, right, I have your Pro. It's very nice. So please, yes, do you have Alexa or another digital assistant at home? And if you have, do you use it for home automatization? Because that makes it very easy for me then to give you an example of what works and what doesn't work yet with a technology like Alexa. Okay, the votes are coming in. It's very interesting. Okay, so 10% of you have Alexa and you use it frequently. 8% use it barely, and 8% say they use it for home automation. So 8% of you will know what I'm talking about in a minute. I'm talking about, where I put stop sharing? I don't know. To get rid of the poll. So the point is, Alexa is built in a way that, let me finish here the poll results. Yeah, now I finished it. Alexa is built in a way that they have program intentions, so what you might do and what you want Alexa to do. For example, you want Alexa to switch off the light and then say something like, Alexa, turn off the light. And the problem is with that is if you rephrase that a little bit, like you say, Alexa, put out the light, it doesn't work anymore. Why is that? This because it's kind of programmed in a way like if then else, a bit more sophisticated, and it expects for you to say certain commands, right? And it's even so Alexa understands very precisely every word you say, so you can even read that in a protocol that the word recognition is very good. It doesn't really get around to understand that put out the light and turn off the light is semantically the same. So the first challenge for AI is the question of semantic, namely using different words, but somehow express the same meaning. The second challenge, so to say, I would like to introduce and to show you with DeepL. So my next question would be, who of you know DeepL and use it? DeepL, as some of you might know, is a startup from Cologne, and it's also financed by St. Gallen, by the way. And it's at the moment the best machine translation system on the market. It's better than Google Translate. And they don't really tell us how it works, but the hint is in the name, so we can profoundly assume that they use deep learning technology. We can even assume based on state of the art that's a kind of sequence-to-sequence technology. So for those of you not familiar with deep learning, I give you a definition of deep learning in a nutshell. Essentially, you can see deep learning is a neural network. A neural network, you can see it as a database where you store data in it. But it's different like a database in the way that you don't get the data precisely back in the way like you stored it. What it does is it compresses the information, and this compression enables deep learning to generalize about the data and to find pattern, right? So how is a system like a machine translation system now trained? It's trained by examples. You give it a lot of parallel sentences, the so-called parallel corpus, and then they have one sentence in German, for example, and one sentence in English. And you give it plenty, thousands of those sentences. And after a while, it starts to generalize. It will learn that synonyms are possible. It will see that you can exchange words and will still get somehow the similar translation, and so on and so forth. That's how it works, right? And the question is then, where do we get, or where do people get this parallel corpus from, right? Because you need actually exactly the same document in different languages. I don't know what they use, but an obvious choice would be the documents from the European Union, where you have each document of the European Union translated in every language of the member states. Another obvious choice would be documents from United Nations, right? If that would be the case, that would actually mean that something like DeepL would be good in formal language, or somehow language that is used in those places, as opposed to informal language. It should be not work so well there, right? And this can be tested by using idioms, because they're not quite logically reasonable in the translation, but they're existing patterns, and you just have to know them by heart, and they translate it like that. So I see 50% of you know DeepL. That's very good. Thank you for that. And for the rest of you who have never seen it, I will give you an example here. So we see here the user interface of DeepL. And we see here, oh, sorry, that was too quick. The sentence, the bridge can't be built due to red tape. Now, when you are a native speaker, or you cultural knowledgeable, you might know how red tape is supposed to be translated. So it's not about a literal red tape wrapped around a bridge, which doesn't allow you to build it. It's actually an idiom for bureaucracy. So in the proper translation sagt dann, die Brücke kann aus bürokratischen Gründen nicht gebaut werden. This is a very good translation, so very well done, DeepL. Let's see if something else works, more informal language, right? One of my favorite is, wir haben uns in der Wolle, which proper translation would actually be, we have an argument, or we fighting, right? And let's see how well DeepL is doing with that. We have each other in the wool. That is a literal translation. It's a non-working translation, right? So you see, my assumption seems to be true. DeepL seems to be trained by formal documents. And this kind of jargon doesn't really work yet there, right? And this is, as those of you who know about deep learning, is a question of having the right data in the training phase. Good. Let's step back a bit in history. We talked about deep learning, and deep learning essentially is neural networks. I would like to tell you a story about my own history mainly nearly over 20 years ago. I was a research student at Daimler Research, and I worked with neural networks. So we had that in the 90s too. And we worked that especially we used that for autonomous cars. So if you think with Tesla, autonomous car would be a brand new thing. No, we had that 20 years ago. But as you see in the images, the big difference was at that time to make it possible, you had to fill your car with a lot of hardware. Nevertheless, we used neural networks for the steering control. That means if there's a slight differentiation from the road, from the lane, it goes slight back, and if there's a strong one, it goes strongly back for security reasons. And we trained the system offline with road data. However, the road data which we had was for straight lines. Nevertheless, the car could easily drive through a curve, right? Even though it was never seen in the data. How is that possible? That's possible due to generalization. At the end of the day, a curve is a form of a strange straight line, right? So that was the first time when I saw that these things can amazingly have amazing abilities, and mainly the ability to generalize about data. A bit like the human brain works, by the way, right? So you don't necessarily remember what clothing you had on the 23rd of March last year. At least I don't remember. But you would know the general pattern of clothing you have. My general pattern is I have blue suits. So there's a likelihood that I had last year on the 23rd of March, if it was a working day, I had a blue suit. That's how generalization works, which means figuring out the general patterns. But what also happened 90 years ago was the so-called AI winter, right? We used that technology, it works, but for some reason or the other, we stopped using it. For example, we needed too much hardware. Half of the car was full with computers. And that changed, of course, tremendously. We have much more powerful hardware. In the end of the day, we have 3 ingredients, the recipe to make now successful deep learning. And if you have followed the research, deep learning came around 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, all of a sudden, everything in image recognition, everything in speech recognition, I don't need the semantics, was all of a sudden 30% better than before. That's something that usually never happens in research, that something is 30% better than before. That's why deep learning basically is a revolution. And the revolution has 3 ingredients. The one is that we have now more data than we ever had before. In terms of images, we talk about peta or terabyte. In terms of text, we need less. 40 gigabyte is a lot for text. That's basically more or less a lot of the web code or from Wikipedia or other documents. Then we have tremendous progress in hardware, machinery with 2 petaflops. DeepL, by the way, has 7 petaflops. They have 3 times the machine I mentioned here. And we have very sophisticated architecture now, doing this kind of generalization of the data. And in this architecture, we can also throw in a lot of data. Like one of the newest developments is deep learning architecture for text understanding by Microsoft, which has 17 billion parameters, amazingly amount of parameters and things, neurons which are used in the processing. And this is essentially why now everything is so successful. As I said, we started with images. Now we apply that technology for language understanding. And let's have a look at some architectures and things we can do now. Oh, sorry, one step too far. Before I have look into the architectures and things we can do now, I want to talk about these petaflops and give you an impression what it means to have 7 or 2 petaflops. 2 petaflops are 2,000 million floating point operations per second. So floating point operation is operation which has a comma. And to visualize that, that's equivalent if every person on Earth, 8 billion, would have 265 pocket calculators, if you would have enough fingers and hands for that, and they would do, within 1 second, 1 calculation. That's the computer power which we have here. And nicely enough, with the new computer science department, we have a machine like that, which helps us tremendously in our research. Before that, I had 5 graphic cards doing the processing, and our calculations of a language model needed a month. And now I can do the same calculation in 1 day. And this is, of course, making a lot of progress because you can have a lot of models in parallel with different parameters and so on and so forth. Why graphic cards? It turns out that the kind of calculation you need in order to create images for games and so on is exactly the same kind of calculation which we need in order to calculate the neural models. namely linear algebra. Okay, now to the architecture. What we in essence do by using deep learning on a massive amount of language data which we have, we build a data model where we, at the end of the day, calculate a correlation of each word to every other word. And this, as you can imagine, with a language like German, which has 250,000 words, you come up with a very complicated model, essentially a multi-dimensional model with 500,000 dimensions. That's very tricky to handle on. Now, these deep learning models are very good in generalization, which essentially means shrinking those models to less dimensions and reducing it to the elementary facts and patterns in the model, right? So the first thing which is shown that deep learning is very good is calculating word similarities by so-called word embeddings, which is a vector of 300 dimensions. And in this vector model, you're not on a keyword level anymore, but on a vector, and you can calculate vector similarities. And then all of a sudden, you can basically show that a cat and a dog is something quite similar, versus a tortoise is something very, very far away. In the meantime, also search engines like Bing and Google Search have changed their search mechanism and using now this vector technology in order to give you better results. In some extent, this also tackles this question of semantics, because when you can calculate the similarity of words, you also can tackle the problem of semantics a bit. So, as I said, we have this very complicated data model with so many dimensions. In fact, also it contains knowledge about grammar. So there are other deep learning architectures, neural models, which allows you to detect dependency parsing, what is a sentence, what is a clause, and so on and so forth. And we also have models like the sequence-to-sequence models, which are used by DeepL, I presume, for machine translation, right? Where you have this parallel corpus and the system is trained to generalize about examples that I've seen. And the newest development is the so-called BERT models. BERT stands for, I have to read it here, bidirectional encoder representation from transformers. So they are amazing. They're pretty new. Since 2 years we have them. And they can do two things at least very well, actually plenty more, but two I want to mention. One is reading comprehension, which essentially is that what a school kid is learning in school. So when it reads text, it's then able to answer simple questions about the text. That means if the text would mention that the Queen of England is born in London, you can later ask the kid or the neural network, where's the Queen born? So we can create a simple question answering system based on that technology. In the same time, you can also use it to train a language model. What does it mean to have a language model? Basically, it's like a human reading a lot of text in a certain genre. Then after a while, the human or the BERT model is able to produce automatically, generatively, text according to the text it has seen before, but also in a new and interesting way. Now, when you would ask the system to write a sentence or a short paragraph, you would probably not notice that it was written by a machine. It would be different with a book, because in the book you would see after a while it's a bit of soulless. It doesn't really have a proper train of thought. But nevertheless, it's an interesting thing, and we did an experiment with that, which I'm going to show you. Experiment was that we have trained such a language model, such a BERT system, on scientific papers in the area of AI. And we don't use it directly to produce purely text for us, but we use it in an interactive way. So I write a text, the machine recognizes the style and the genre I'm writing text and gives me proposals how could I continue this kind of text. So I'll show you here in this example. I'm going to write something like, this research project is about conversational AI. And then I click a button and I get 3 proposals from the system: a new approach to design and evaluation, a research area of artificial intelligence, and which is the type of AI that works. So you see the neural network has figured out what is my topic about and gives me a proposal according to a scientific paper. I choose here the second one, and then I continue to write on my own about algorithms to understand natural language. And then I click again, ask for new proposal, and you see I get continuations for a new sentence, which are typical in a scientific paper, like this project is N, on this paper I will, our initial focus was. At this time I will ignore the proposal and write on my own. We aim to build a chatbot, and then I get a proposal from the AI again that can learn and think, that is conversational, that can be intelligent. I go with conversational. And now I introduce a new topic. All of a sudden, I talk about legal topics. This becomes interesting later on. I finished a sentence and I asked the system for new proposal of sentences, like in this research, or the research term is flat. I go with this research, and then we aim to answer questions based on. And you see, now the neural network remembers that I talked with all our topics and gives me a proposal directly fitting to my text here with legal issues. And what we get in the end of the is a text which is half written by humans, half written by AI, based on what we have seen in papers. And this is, of course, very interesting for journalists. It's interesting for students. It's not even plagiarism, because you know the saying, if it's stolen from one person, it's plagiarism. If it's stolen from and merged from thousands of people, like in this case, it's creativity. So we have a form of computational creativity here. Okay, so what else can we do? Well, we can also use that. You remember that I mentioned this reading comprehension, what BERT can do. You can use and extend this technology to build chatbots, to have so-called conversational AI. And then you can ask simple questions like, what is the capital of Canada? Or how many inhabitants does Zurich have? Or you can even ask similarity questions, so like, which companies are similar to Halliburton? And you have also used a technology like that, also in the area of legal tech, but more specifically for taxation law. And within taxation law, if you have a background knowledge that I'm not an expert, for transfer pricing. And that's what I'm showing you in the following. So this is a chatbot. And you have to see chatbots have actually more challenges than being only a question answering system. It also has a dialogue with you. And that having a dialogue with you means that you need to remember what was said before, so that you can basically adopt your answers to questions later. You don't need to re-ask anything again. Okay, I give you an example in the area of transfer pricing. That's kind of a tricky question there. Must intercompany agreements be renewed or revised in a certain time frame in order to be valid? If you know the area, you know this is not enough information to answer the question. You need to ask, which country is this happening? So what is your country? Then you might say Switzerland, and then it says, no, for Switzerland, you don't need to do this intercompany agreement. And we have built a system like that. So what other things we can do? Well, I'm from Germany, and I came to Switzerland, and the Swiss language is a challenge for me. So I thought, well, why not build a system helping me understand Swiss German? And that's, we were also lucky to find a good master student who helped us working in that area. And before I talk about our system, I will kind of raise the problems here, what you have, because it's actually easier to build such a system for high language, right? Because then you only need, like in High German or in English. But for Swiss German, you have so many variations, and you don't have a standard writing system for that. And you have, let's say, 20 German-speaking cantons, and if each canton has 100 variations of that dialect in the canton, you end up with 2,000 variations. So it's a tricky task. And the first one is you have no writing style for Swiss German. You can come up with a pseudo-phonetic writing style, but that's hard to produce, and it would be different for every dialect. What then is usually be done is that you use High German, but you write it by using Swiss grammar. Like, instead of having a sentence where you say, Peter arbeitete gestern bis in die Nacht, you would annotate it with, der Peter hat gestern bis in die Nacht geschafft. And that has the advantage that's more easy to produce. It's a standardized way of German language. And also has the advantage you get the annotation, not for free, but there are some sources where you can get it, for example, subtitling in television. You get something like that there. The normalized Swiss German, that's more academic thing. I go too much into that. That doesn't exist yet. And what our master student, his name is Tobias Rodorf, did is he used to have an internship before at Swiss Television. So he brought us 15 hours of SRF Meteo and 109 hours of SRF Club. And he mixed it with other sources like Archimop, that's a data source from the University of Zurich. And he used it to train the system. Overall, he collected 178 hours of training data. However, the problem is 178 hours of training data is not enough. For from the language understanding system, you would need at least 3,000 hours of annotated speech. Nevertheless, he could build it. How could he do that? How could he build it anyway? The trick is that we use something called transfer learning, which means you use a model which is already trained for a slightly different task, and you retrain the model to the new problem. And we experimented with one model which was built for High German and retrained that to Swiss German, and used another system which was built for English and retrained that to Swiss German. Surprisingly, it turns out that the English model performed better. Maybe Swiss German is phonetically closer than to Swiss German, I don't know. But I would rather presume that the quality of the example data trained for the English model was much better and higher. In any case, he trained a deep learning system which achieved state of the art, and I'm going to show you an example of a brief SRF Meteo, so weather forecast, subtitled by our system or by the system which was developed by that student.
Guten Abend und ganz herzlich willkommen hier bei Meteo. Unten grau, oben blau, das ist das Wettermotto vom Morgen. Wenn man definitiv an die Sonne will, dann muss man morgen in die Höhe.
You see, it's interesting. We have actually good results. Not all of them end up in High German. The system seems to have a fallback strategy. So if it doesn't understand the word sun properly, it gives a kind of phonetic description like Sonne. And also, as you see, since the origin is from the English language, we don't have umlauts. So Höhe ends up to have OEs. But otherwise, we perform very nicely state of the art with this technology. So now I'm also going to show you a bit of future or some system that was built by Google. Google AI Voice Assistant, which has somehow simple tasks by calling at a restaurant or a hairdresser to make an appointment, but it's done in a very nice way. On the left side with the Google logo, we have the AI. On the right side with the logo of the person and the phone, we have a real human talking. So now listen to that, please.
How can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a woman's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now? Okay, we have at 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's her first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks, great. Have a great day. Bye.
Hi. So you see, that was, in my opinion, a very impressive demonstration. What makes this demonstration so impressive? It's not only about the ability to understand the human language, but also this kind of sounds, interjections they are called, which makes the AI voice so human, right? You say things like and aha, affirmatives and so on, which very human-like, which you normally would not expect from a machine, right? So this is a small glimpse into the future, and I also would like to end my webinar with a glimpse into the future or predictions about the future. However, with a disclaimer, as we know from Niels Bohr, prediction is very difficult, especially if they're about the future. But we have profound assumption from McKinsey and others that we can assume that within 5 years, 1/3 of our business processes in companies will be automated, especially in the context of the talk, everything which has to do with language and text. And with professions, we work a lot with language and text, like let's say legal law. McKinsey estimates that 22% of legal work, 35% of paralegal work can be automated. That means automatically reading of contracts, automatically producing of contracts, automatically giving advice about taxation, as you have seen a little bit, giving you advice about other legal matters. it's very conceivable that this can be, at least for the simple things, be automated. And this is now a more risky prediction is if the progress which we have at the moment of our technology would be in a linear way, so would continue like that with no plateau, we would actually have within 5 to 10 years systems with which you could talk like with a real human person. So this vision of Google would come true. You wouldn't notice anymore that you talk to a machine if we have a linear progression. And we can make all another prediction. So if we have such a nice virtual assistant, this language technology could be built in robots. So you could have a robot helping you in your daily work. You could talk to him. And also maybe interesting in a country like Switzerland or Germany, which are aging demographic, these things could then be used to be companions for the elderly. So that's my prediction for the future. Thanks a lot for listening to this part of the webinar. Now I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Siegfried. I'm amazed what's already possible today. Shall we stop the screen sharing? Did I stop the webinar? No. Where's the webinar?
Yeah.
Good. So first questions are already coming in, plus please send us more questions. I'll start with the first one. Lately, the European Commission published its vision on how to regulate AI. Last week, IBM and Microsoft signed a pledge for ethical AI. The Vatican initiated the pledge, by the way. Why did it take so long, and what are, in your opinion, the challenges in regulating AI worldwide?
Oh, that's a good and tricky question. Probably more a question for a humanity person than a computer scientist, because we usually work on that, what is technically possible. But nevertheless, what typically happens is that, as you have seen with this example of the scientific papers, whatever data you put in training the system, this creates a kind of bias in the system, right? And I understand that there are some people who say, well, you have to carefully select the data and carefully look at what bias might be created there, because we know that if you choose the wrong text or don't look carefully, there might be racial bias in the answers of the system. There might be bias against women in that, and so on and so forth. Whatever bias exists in the real world will be reflected in the AI system. So I understand that there's a will to regulate those, and yeah, what else?
What was the question? Do you want to look at the question again?
No, that's fine.
Just okay, next question. Bruno, thanks for the question. There's deep learning and deep fake pictures.
Yeah.
What exactly does deep refer to?
That refers to the architecture. Deep means, so as I mentioned in the 90s, I worked with neural networks that have 3 layers, right? Because that's what we could do with our computing power at that time. Now we have architectures with 750 layers. And each of those layers is kind of specializing on different aspects. For image, that's very easy to explain. One of the front layers would specialize on geometrical figures, like lines. One of the later middle layers would then specialize on squares and round things. And one of the end layers would then recognize, oh, this is a furniture, a road, or something like else. Then, right? So the deep means the amount of layers which we have. That's the deep aspect.
Thank you, Siegfried. Referring to your example with the scientific paper,
yeah,
which I assume is far from being a productive system or producing real papers, but who would be mentioned as the author in this case?
Oh, that's a good question. Also ethical question, not a technical one. I know that some teams who do something like that indeed try to make this machine, give it a nice name, the co-author of the paper, which to some extent makes sense.
Thank you. Currently, what is the role of our university in AI?
Oh, well, the university, as you know, is a business university, but it turns out if a very clever one, because this is at least the first business university which I know, which introduces now computer science into their curriculum and has hired computer science professors. So that means the goal and the vision is that we can do a nice combination here in the university between what is technical possible as provided by the computer scientists and how is it applicable to business, for example, as provided by our business professors. And I think this is a really strong, unique selling point of this university.
Can you name, talking about business, can you name some best practices or examples for application of chatbots in e-commerce customer service? Do you have any insights?
I'm not very good in answering that because usually I have my own customers and my customers come to me because they have used technology which is available on the market. Like with Alexa, you can use Alexa to build your own chatbot. And they're so disappointed that they happily come to me and I happily show them what I can do with the technology better than what is available in the market. So probably not the best answer to your question, but at the moment is if you're interested in that area, please come to me.
So no real best practices yet.
The best practice is, as I said, by the very nature is it's somehow easy to build chatbots when you have a lot of example data, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you kind of have Q&A, what are the typical questions of your customer? What is the typical answer for that customer? And you have plenty of those things. And you should also, if you have some shape or form of logging, so what might people ask, please switch on your logging system, because as more data we have, as better for us in building the system. Another game area is if you would like to have a chatbot about expert knowledge, like coming from a database, because that's not another system you would train by a lot of examples. That's a bit more like old-fashioned AI, so to say, where we would build a knowledge-based system for you.
Thank you, Siegfried. With this technology on the rise, how can we actually prevent fake news and information? Do you have any opinion on that or insights?
Good and tricky question, a very hard question. I mean, what we have is legal regulation. I think and I understand is that in future, if an AI system like the Google one calls you, it has to tell you that it's an AI system. So that helps a bit if you have an honest caller. In images, we could think about watermarks. Maybe we could think about also have a kind of audio watermarks in the artificial voice, something like that. But in the end of the day, it's a typical game. If somebody tries to be unlawful, and you see that with spam, you see that with other technologies, then we ending up having a race in technology.
Thank you. One more question. I think the ethics about AI is really a hot topic here. How will the increasing awareness of the evil use of data circulating via open channels affect the acceptance of such technologies as AI in the consumer space?
I presume acceptance always have to do with trust, and trust is something that you buy stuff on a reliable source, you buy stuff on a reliable brand, and I would presume you used an AI technology from a reliable company or a reliable university.
Mm-hmm. And there's trust and also getting used to all this.
Yeah.
From your personal perspective, how many generations we will need to be able to accept that the role of cutting edge technology is actually impacting our lives in a positive way? To clarify how much time is needed to reset our mindsets.
Well, there's this saying, I hope I get it together, something like, if you're born with a technology, you will make a career out of it. If that technology happens to you in your lifetime, you kind of accept it. But if that technology comes to you when you're old, you never accept it. So I say, well, the easiest way for those mindset is when they're born with the technology, like my kids, since I use the technology a lot at home, they grow up using Alexa and all that stuff. For those, it's very normal to talk to a machine, as opposed to, let's say, actually also my grandmother got an Alexa last week, and she's amazingly happy with that thing. Because the user interface is so much better than computer or tablet. She uses the user interface which she always used. She talks to Alexa. Maybe she's sometimes frustrated about the semantics that Alexa can understand, but that's a different story.
So getting back to the talk topic of legal and AI in legal, how advanced are AI tools in the legal area? Do you think it will also apply in the compliance and ethics area where there's a lot of ethical decision making to do? Will AI be able to help us there?
I'm not an expert for this ethical question, as you might have figured out, but I can say something about technology. The thing about legal aspects, it's a bit easier in the Anglo-Saxon system because that's a system based on previous cases. And then hence a chatbot, a legal bot, will refer to a previous case for you. In the European system, it's a bit more tricky because we have a rule-based system, which means you probably would have to build a system that is using this example-based training, but also have to be expertise knowledge in a nice combination. So the European law is a bit more technically challenging than the Anglo-Saxon law.
Here's one, getting back to your topic. The initial question was, can AI understand humans? But how do you actually define understand in this context?
Well, we computer scientists have the so-called Turing test. That means if you would have a conversation with a machine for a while and you wouldn't notice that it's a machine, then that's for me total and fully understanding of human language.
Thank you. Is the structure of a deep learning system a black box that we hear about so often? And is there a lot of useless structure in a trained model?
Is it black box? Well, if you train the system, if you're an expert, it's not. I know where black box is coming from. Okay, I struggled with the question a bit. I think it refers to explainable AI because what we usually say is, well, this system learns a generalization, but usually it's hard for those systems to explain why it does this generalization. Why has it decided that red tape is bureaucracy, but we have unsere Wolle is not? And there's no new research going on to do something actually to some extent what humans do. Sometimes we do gut decisions, and after that we rationalize our decision by logic. And so also explainable AI to some extent works like that. We have a neural network doing the decision, and then we might have a classical AI system trying to figure out a rational reason why this decision makes sense. That would open the black box a bit. The second part of the question was?
Let's see, sorry, it's somewhere in here. We were at the black, and is there a lot of useless structure in the trained model?
Actually not, there's probably more unutilized structure. I did a lot of research in the data structure for language, and as I mentioned briefly before, it's hard to convey, is that by collecting the data, especially when you have 7 billion parameters, this data model contains everything from language. It contains synonyms, it contains grammatical structure, it even contains word knowledge and so on and so forth. And the hard thing to do is to find the proper deep learning architecture which utilizes this data in the best way. Because the old models like this vector embedding models, they couldn't do contextual resolution. What does this mean? That means they couldn't distinguish a computer mouse from a living mouse. They would just create one vector of a mouse. But that information actually was in the data, but the neural model didn't do it. And the new models like BERT, they create up to 5 contextual models. They can distinguish up to 5 different contextualization of a word, which is much more powerful. So I think it's nothing useless in the data model. It's actually, we don't utilize it fully yet.
Mm-hmm. A follow-up question, understanding human language and understanding humans seems a big difference to me. You're talking about the first one, don't you?
Well, human language, my old supervisor always said, when you solve the problem of language understanding, you solved all the problems of AI. Meaning is, in order that humans can communicate, you have to have background knowledge. You have to have the same cultural knowledge than the other guy. You have to need a lot of knowledge, and you have to understand stuff like irony and metaphors and idioms, and you have to understand the fuzziness of language, because we tend to be very fuzzy when we talk. And that's what I mean with understanding language. So I don't mean recognizing a word. That's a simple task. That's a solved one. I really mean with that, talk to a computer like if it would be a human person, and you don't notice that you talk to a machine. That's for me the big vision and the question here.
Excellent. Thank you, Siegfried. I think we're coming to the end of our webinar. Some questions are unanswered, but I think you still touched upon them in your replies to the other questions.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for viewing and listening. We have 6 more webinars lined up for you in this digital week. So I'd be happy to see your name on the participant list in one of the other webinars. And we'll send around, as I said, the slides and the recording in the next week. All Digital Week webinars together, so be a bit patient. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thanks for this amazingly high quality question. It was a pleasure for me being here and having a webinar for the first time. Thank you.
And thank you, Siegfried, for doing this with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.